I get the privilege today being with my friend, Mr. Lee Watson. This is going to be a lot of fun for me because I've known Lee. Well, I'm going to let him tell the story, but you were, I don't even know if you were 13 years old.
I think about 13.
About 13. Mm-hmm. My folks, when I was really young, bought a cabin up in the mountains on the Skycomish River.
Yep.
And then when I graduated from high school in 76, they moved up there and they made it their home. They built the garage and they did some work. And that's where they
put in a
moved
sauna.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The sauna. Right. The loft and the sauna, very famous places. But they moved up there. And I think that was a big deal for everybody in our family because it's like now they are not on your way to anything. They are an hour out of town, up in the mountains, on the river.
You have to be going skiing or going to Leavenworth to go visit them.
Right, that's it. One of the two. There's not on your way to Safeway, that's for sure. But when they moved there and when they got settled in, that's when they met you and your sister, Jean.
Yep.
And I'd like to start, Lee, just right there. I'd like to just have you describe that life, living 100 yards from their place, or a couple different places right there in Bering.
Right. Yes.
And what life looked like as a young man, 9th grade, 8th grade, somewhere like that, in a little tiny town, Bering, with your sister.
Yeah.
That was my first glimpse of you. Was then paint a picture of what life looked like then.
It was much simpler than it is now, definitely. But at the same time, as you know, I grew up pretty poor, and we lived in a trailer park in Bering, at the very end of the trailer park, and we lived in a 18-foot travel trailer because my mom been kind of a nomad her entire life. So she always wanted to be able to take off at a moment's notice, and that's why we moved and lived at so many different places, but always came back to Skycomish Valley, Bering. And but I was into the trailer park one day, and your mother would drive by in her, I think it's a 1976 Jeep Levi edition with the denim top and the denim seats, and it was a white Jeep, and she would drive by every day to go check the mail at the post office at the Bering store. And one day she stopped when I was outside, and she said, "Hey, do you want a job?" And I said, "Yeah."
Did you know her?
I did not know her.
Total stranger?
Total stranger. I'd seen the Jeep go by before, but I didn't know who it was,
Right.
And I mean, your parents were looked at as being kind of wealthy people. You know, I mean, they weren't extremely wealthy or anything. They were comfortable.
Right.
But in Bering, they were looked at as being wealthy.
Right.
And she just said, I said, "Yeah, I'd like to have a job." And she said, "Come to my house on Saturday." And she probably gave me the time to show up. And she said, "I'll introduce you to my husband and he'll put you to work." And that was the very beginning of my relationship with your parents. I would go there and work for him. He paid me $2 an hour, which at that time was about the going rate to go to a movie. $2, and they would invite me in for breakfast. Your dad made some fantastic pancakes, and or lunch, and they'd ask me questions, like, "Do you know Jesus?" And which part of the Bible do you like the most? And I didn't know.
I'm not real sure.
Right,
the first part.
Right, exactly. And so I told them I like the New Testament better than the Old Testament, and I didn't know what I was talking about. And they they helped me out. They started me out with my Christian walk, my relationship with Jesus Christ, and I understand now that your parents have passed, that was something that had come to them not too long before they moved up there.
Yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong, you were the one that brought them to Christ. Is that right?
Well, I wouldn't say that for sure, but Jeff and I were involved in Young Life when we were in high school. And, Jeff graduated in 74. I was in 76, high school. But I think they got involved in Young Life. Young Life was at our house a few times. So the Young Life leaders that we had, I think, were the ones that had the greater influence on them and just sort of put things to them in a different way. We had always gone to church, but it wasn't really inspiring. Although I really did like the pastor of the Lutheran church we went to. The message came to us all, I think, about the same time in a different way. And so and so there they are up in the mountains, and you were at this time you were 12 or 13, something like that, right? Yeah.
My sister's a year younger than me.
You're younger, yeah. And I heard of you for a while, and I knew that they'd mentioned that you're doing some work. Dad's always got projects, but I think it never was about the projects. He probably could do the projects just fine himself.
It took more time to teach me how to do it than it was for him to do it on his own.
Yeah, there was definitely a mission to what they were trying to do, at least in their own way. But I remember thinking that, oh boy, Lee's working for Dad. Well, let's see how long this lasts, because my dad is not the easiest one to work for. He has his way of doing things. Did he ever teach you how to wash a car correctly?
Yes. You start on the top, and then you go around the windows. And then you work down like the trunk or the front, and then you go along each side, and then you hit the wheels last because they're the dirtiest. And you better not miss any chrome, because your dad loved the chrome on his big white Lincoln. The Jeep, okay, but the Lincoln, don't miss any chrome. The 1970s, we still had chrome around. So. Yeah,
I remember Lee as younger than you. I mean, that was probably the first job we were capable of, was helping him wash the cars. But I mean, it was drop dead serious. I remember one day, okay, Jeff, Greg, you're in charge. You're going to watch this car. And we had, because there were two of us, we had the right way taught to us too, that we'd take the car from front to back in half. You start on the top, just like you said. Well, for whatever reason, on my side, I don't know why, I just wanted to sit down. So I grabbed a sponge, and I'm sitting down doing the wheels and the tires, first.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I'll tell you something. He walked out, and that was it. Change all the water. Start over.
Yep, you're going to be scratching the
paint. Let me say it one more time, and I'm not going to say it again. And I'll never forget that. It's so knowing there is a procedure, and do it right, and do it once.
Yes.
But as much as it was difficult, there were undeniable parts that were ingrained. Yeah. Tell me about your dad, because you're working for my dad at that age. Where's your dad? And I know the answer, but let's go there.
So on my first birthday, of course, I was born, my father was in the Army, and he didn't graduate from high school. He got into trouble, and they told him, join the Army or go to jail. And this was 1959 in Post Falls, Idaho. And so he chose to join the Army. And so he joined the Army and went to Korea. And then after Korea, he came back for leave, and he had already he grew up with my mom, and my mom ended up being pregnant from somebody else, and my dad said, I don't care, I want to marry you, I've always loved you. So they got married. And that boy was adopted out, that she was pregnant with. So then my father and her ended up going to Germany. And I was born in Berlin because he worked for the Army with the Berlin Brigade. So then after Germany, he went to Vietnam. And then when I was a year old, he was killed on my first birthday. So in Vietnam, with a total of 7 of them were killed at the same time, and 2 armored personnel carriers that blew up and burnt them all, exploded and killed them all. So it was an accident. Accidents do happen, but also freedom's not free. You know, I mean, we do have a price to pay, and unfortunately, that was the price we paid. So, so having your dad there as a mentor for me, and I say mentor, but really, your dad was like a dad to me. I didn't have a dad, and I grew up not knowing all of those things. I didn't know how to throw a football. You know, we spoke earlier about your kids and throwing the football and stuff like that. There was nobody there for me like that. So,
and tell me about your mom. I mean, that has got to be. She's got a 1-year-old, probably pregnant with Jean.
She was.
At the time.
She was 7 months pregnant with my sister. She's got a 1-year-old kid.
And husband gets killed in Vietnam.
Yeah. So, I mean, there are a lot of people that suffer from trauma, and I believe that she was suffering from trauma, and her way of dealing with that trauma was she did drugs. She ended up, spending all the money that she got for the loss of him. Not just spending it. Some people stole it from her too, but they're forgiven. But she ended up being kind of a nomad and always trying to stay away from things. But then she ended up in a car accident and broke her back. And so my sister and I pretty much grew up with family members, like grandparents. And then there was a couple that my mom trusted and named Skip and Mike. And they kind of raised my sister and I for a few years. And then they moved to Snohomish. So my whole family's from Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And so they lived in Spokane, and then they moved to Snohomish, not too far from here. And that's how we ended up coming to Washington State, was with them in Snohomish. And I went to, I think, first grade with them. So, I was, 7? Something like that. And then my mom finally got everything all back together. Not everything together, but, I mean, she was able to take care of us. And then she took custody back. And we lived in Everett for a year, and then the next year we moved to Skykomish.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I have a memory. There was you mentioned the trailer park, which is fairly famous. There's about 6 or 7 of them in burying there. But there's a little, what I call a Pippi Longstocking farmhouse that was just at the end of the road past my parents' place.
Yeah.
Green trim, white, little leaning house.
Yep.
And I think that's the first time I met you, is that you and Jean were there, and it seems as though your mom she wasn't there much,
right.
if at all.
Right.
And I remember, talking to my dad about it, that they're keeping an eye, in my dad's way. I can just picture him with his, well, we're keeping an eye on him. We're just kind of keeping an eye on things there because they don't have much. And
my mom parked the trailer in front of the house. Yes. The house was an old farmhouse from the early 1900s, so there's no running water. There's electricity, but no toilet, nothing like that.
Yeah.
And so my sister and I lived in the house, no heat.
Right.
So winters get cold up there, and so we lived in the house, and my mom lived in the trailer. My sister lived in the trailer with my mom most of the time. I was becoming a teenager,
Right.
So I wanted my independence, so I lived inside the house and snuggled up in a sleeping bag.
I think that as we've talked on this podcast, that both my mom and dad had similar circumstances.
Yes.
With no fathers and mothers that were dealing with all kinds of demons, trauma.
Yeah.
And so I think that, they just naturally just saw it and had a heart for it. And, but when you look at your early influences, those people and opportunities around you that formed you, can you know, we're all, I mean, if a child is born, they have two parents that are able and wanting, wow,
Right.
that kid's really won the lottery. You know, it's because there's so many that don't, you know, have that situation. And
it's unfortunate to say that I'm not unique in that fashion.
Right.
And there are a lot of people out there that are like me. And that's one of the things I really wanted to say here today was that I'm not unique. You know, there are, and even people that do have two parents still suffer trauma. They still suffer problems. They still run into those things. But it's about getting past those things. You know, it's about recovering from those things and moving on with life instead of.
Yeah.
You know, I kind of think my mom let those things take over. You know, and so then she self-medicated and hid away and stuff like that. I don't blame her for that. It's how she had to deal with it. You know, I love her. Like I loved your parents, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Well, you, I know that the next chapter that I remember being privy to is that Dad was gathering a few of you from the small school. Imagine your graduation class was...
We had 8.
I was going to say 10. 8, right? Yeah. But anyway, there were a few of you in that class that he decided he was going to try to take you to a Young Life camp up in Canada.
Yes.
Malibu Club in Canada.
Malibu Club in Canada.
And I remember thinking, wow, okay, once again, these guys don't know what they're getting into with my dad. You know, I can just see how that's going to go because, but he did, which to me was impressive that, you know, he's in his, well, they're young parents, but at the time he was in, you know, his mid to late 40s.
Yes.
And thinking, okay, I'm going to take some kids from this little town and I'm going to put them up there among another few hundred kids at this camp and this beautiful place up in Canada. Tell me about that experience.
Well, if anybody could herd cats, it was your dad. You know, I mean, he was organized. He knew exactly how things needed to go.
Yeah.
One of the things that came up was that I was too young.
Right.
You had to be in high school.
That's just a detail.
Yeah. I don't know what he did. I'm sure he just talked to some people. I mean, he had friends that were in Young Life, and they probably made an exception or something to that effect. But I was only 14, and I was supposed to be 15 in order to go. I think that Jeff was only 14 as well. But Mike Land, he was a year older than us. And then Don, your cousin, Donnie, he went too. I think he was of age. He was 15, but... the four of us went up there, and it was life-changing. You know, I mean, to be able to hear the testimony from all of these other kids that were dealing with the same kind of things that we were dealing with, that were having issues and problems with family or society and trying to make their way through life at a young age. And we, or all of us, were exposed to, you know, problem lives, you know, and having to deal with that. So, but your dad was great. I mean, he really was. He was there for us.
Sort of built to be a guide, you know. Whether you're hunting with him or working with him, he's going to make sure that everybody gets back safe, you know.
And that you're doing it properly.
And that you're doing it right.
You know, I mean, he'd come to me and say, don't pick it up twice when you can pick it up once. You know, he was talking about the efficiency. And
Absolutely.
You know, let's be efficient and effective.
That's
you know,
right.
Let's balance the two out.
Don't go anywhere empty-handed.
Right.
I know the lessons well. Like, oh my gosh. Well, that's quite an experience. Okay, from there, graduating from this little high school.
I want to back up.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Because you're skipping a part, and it's because it's about you.
No, I'm trying to skip some things.
So I think it was when I was 13. My father, or since my father died on my first birthday, you can ask my mother today, and she'll tell you it's the worst day of the year because she lost her husband, and I understand that. But she did not celebrate my birthday. I think I had a celebration on my 5th birthday. And then on right around my 13th birthday, you and your wife did this big, huge I don't know what to call it.
Scavenger hunt
around Seattle, Lake Washington, Gasworks Park. I mean, we went everywhere, and you guys didn't know us, and you brought my sister and I. She was 12, I was 13. We're riding around in your Jeep and just going all over the place and meeting all your friends who were so welcome to come. And somebody was like following us around, photographing. It wasn't him, was it?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. No.
But, you know, it sent a huge message to us that people actually care about other people. You know, I mean, because before that, I was a long-haired kid. You can't see. I can't imagine that now.
Hard to imagine.
I was a long-haired, skinny kid that everybody thought was going to be a drug user or whatever for the rest of his life, and he was never going to become much of anything. And for you guys to do that really sent a message to us that we are normal people. We're not, you know, we're not abnormal. And I mean, I really appreciate everything that you and your wife did for us. That was incredible, you know.
Well, it was a whole group of I was leading a Young Life club at Shorecrest High School at the time, and so this is all a bunch of Young Life kids.
Yeah.
And from that club, and you know, they had heard about you and Jean, and as we would sort of have some perspective on things and talk about life, you know, with them, and so anyway, it seemed like a good idea. At least nobody got hurt. But yeah, we covered a lot of ground, and I remember some of the particulars. I actually have pictures of that whole thing. I'll break them out sometime.
I would love to see those.
Yeah, I do. I have a whole...
Of all the moves we've done.
All the signs and all the people dressed up crazy and all the stuff. Yeah, I can remember. Matter of fact, one of the guys that was very involved with that, we got together with in this very hangar about a month ago.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, his name was Sean O'Gara, and a tremendous guy that was one of my club kids from that way back then.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's those. I think that maybe the point of that, though, is that you never really know sometimes. Right. And we're just kids ourselves thinking, oh, this will be fun. This will be fun for these young kids. And we all had fun doing it. You know, we were just screwing around, you know. But you never really know sometimes what impact a seed planted might have.
Right.
You just don't know. And I think of things that were done in my life that I'm sure who was organizing it had no idea that I'd be talking about it 50 years later, you know, or something like that. So it's those little things, they do get remembered.
The one thing that really stands out to me is when we went to Lake Washington, and somebody had like a really nice ski boat, a ski natique or something, and they had chopped the wood like he came in too fast or something. He said something like, "Oh, I've come in here too fast too many times," and the whole dock was like they took an axe to it or something.
Split it apart.
Yeah, split it apart and made it look bad, like he'd been coming in too hot too many times or something. But it was just one of those little things that stuck in my head from that whole thing, you know.
That was a crazy group of kids, and I think that when you're with that kind of youth and craziness, you know, you sort of become crazy yourself. Right. Sean O'Gara was reminding me of a gathering when they were all juniors or seniors in high school, and there's this whole group of them, the same group that was entertaining you guys on your birthday. But at the time, I had shattered my kneecap, and so I was in a leg cast from my ankle up to my hip.
Oh.
And yet life's moving on, and we're still doing all these things. So we had this big gathering out at Lake Rossiger, and everybody's water skiing, and it really bugged me. So I thought, forget it. So they're all out on the dock, and I'm going through the kitchen, and I found a bunch of garbage bags and duct tape, and I duct taped my leg cast so it wouldn't get wet. And then I hobbled down to the dock and put on a vest and said, I'm next. And they're like, what? I said, hey, you start with your front foot in, straight anyway, drag your right foot, I'll just pop right back. No problem. And they go, well, it's your leg. So I did. I popped right up. No problem. Put my right foot in the back ski, and I started skiing on one ski, and I'm behind the boat. It's all going just fine. And we go around the lake for a lap, and I thought, okay, well, now we're coming back by the dock. I got to spray him. Well, I remember kind of cutting out right, just so you go slow. It was working. But then I made this move to try to spray him with my left leg in a leg cast. And, I sprayed him all right. But then the angle got worse and worse, and I crashed. And all I remember is that the garbage bag, now nothing was very rigid in there, and there's these chunks of plaster broken to pieces inside of my bag.
But not your leg.
Yeah. The doctor, when I called him, said, I think I need a new cast. And he goes, what'd you do?
I thought you would, Greg. Yeah, that's probably what he was thinking.
A lot of fun stories from back then. But well, you graduated, and I think like every kid, you wanted to get out of your environment and get going, get to work. And I had a short chapter where you came to work on my construction crew.
Yeah.
And I remember that. And
Pinneo and Michelle.
Yeah. And you came to work for us. And I even remember the first jobs that we were about to bulldoze a house in the next few months. And so, okay, well, you can live here, and we can put you on the crew and this and that. Take me from there, because then we lost track of each other for quite some time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So take me from there. Well, it happened.
So I had stayed with your parents a couple of times. After I graduated from high school, I went to Western Washington University, and they politely said, try a community college next year. That was our polite way of saying, you failed. And so your dad came and picked me up, and then I stayed with them, and then I went to Marine Corps boot camp. And then when I came back home from boot camp, but I say home, back to your parents' house, after boot camp, I was expecting to start college. Again, I was going to go to community college, and it was too late. And so I stayed with them for a little while, and I think they got tired of me, and they talked you into hiring me. And so they said that you had a job for me and a place to stay. And I stayed in the house right behind your office, and a neat little house. And so I stayed there, and then I worked for you there. And then one of the things that I remember that for a time frame wise was Challenger, I think it was. The Challenger accident. Yeah, because I was watching TV that morning, and I said, okay, I only have 100 feet to walk to get to work, and I'll be on time. And so I was watching that on TV, and then I ended up being late, and I came to the office, and you were like, hey, where are you, buddy? Where were you? I was like, the Challenger just blew up, and you guys were like, what? And then turned on the TVs and found out that that's what had happened. Yeah. So, but that was the time frame that we're talking about. But I remember going to your house several times. You guys invited me to come over. I remember putting Christmas lights up and doing all of that. And I remember turning in catching some burglars. I don't know if you remember that. Right. There was an office right next door to your office, and I was in the house back there, and
everybody thought it was vacant, but it wasn't.
It wasn't. I was there watching TV, and I see these guys breaking into the back of a dental office. And so I called 911. And the police officers showed up and chased the guys down into Edmonds and caught them and arrested them. And then he came back later and talked to me. And it turned out, like, I don't know how many years later, I ran into that same officer because I was then applying for Linwood. It was like, it's Mount Lake Terrace and Linwood PD. I was applying there, and I ran into that same officer when I was applying for law enforcement. And he and I got a chat, and he remembered the whole incident.
Remembered?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So, those were some of the things. But some of the great things about working with you guys was the things that I learned. I learned so much about building houses and what it takes and what to do. I was the gopher. I was your guys' gopher. I was go for this and go for that. But I learned a lot just by being around you and listening to you on the phone, talking to people and organizing things. And I learned a lot during that time frame. But then your mom found me a better job.
Right. Yep.
And so then I moved to, I ended up moving to Snohomish and then driving into Seattle every day. And I worked at the First and Union building. Putting in condominiums there for, I think it was the manager of the Mariners and stuff like that, and that was a good a year and a half or something that I worked there. Nice. So Doug Hickson was the guy's name. I don't know if you guys knew that.
Military seed, was that the seed that was planted that eventually got you interested or pursuant of law enforcement?
So the story goes, what happened was I have all the letters from my father that he sent my mom from Vietnam. And in the letters, he was mentioning that he wanted to become a law enforcement officer when he got back from Vietnam. And when he was killed, he only had 30 days left when he was killed. So he was almost out. And he wanted to go into law enforcement. Well, since he was unable to get into law enforcement because he was killed, both of his younger brothers joined law enforcement and had long careers in law enforcement. One then the younger became an attorney, and the other one was the sheriff of Kootenai County, Rocky Watson. So they had a big influence for law enforcement wise, and my dad too, with that legacy, I guess. But I had been in the Marine Corps Reserves, and when I was working at down there at downtown Seattle, I had the opportunity to go to a school with the Marine Corps over in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri for heavy equipment. So that was another something that helped me in construction, you know?
Right.
And so I became a heavy equipment operator. And then I moved. When I came back, my uncle called me up and said, I think it's time for you to go back to school. And he said, I've got a place for you to stay, and I'll pay for your books, and you can just come to school. And so then I moved to Coeur d'Alene and went to North Idaho College, where met my friend Don Stardio, who's 7 foot tall there, and some other very great friends. That was I think the beginning part of getting me into law enforcement was the influence from both my uncles, which I really didn't have a relationship with them until I was 17.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
No relationship really.
Your dad's
that I can remember.
Your dad's brothers.
My dad's brothers.
Yeah. Right.
Didn't know them till I was probably 17, and we went to Coeur d'Alene like once a summer. We would go over there, but we would visit my grandparents. That's all. My grandma and Grandpa Watson from my dad's side, and then the Brodigams from my mom's side. So
all in Coeur d'Alene.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Well. What I find really just amazing is that starting with very, very little opportunity, without a dad, a mom that's in trauma, dealing with that there was a path, there was influences, there were people along the way, and that kept the ball moving forward. Because if fast forward now to a very storied career in law enforcement, give me the stats on how long you've been in law enforcement now and to what capacity. This is a lot of responsibility with what you've had.
So this is my 30th year in law enforcement. I started in 1995 with Kitsap County Sheriff's Office, and I worked there for 24 and a half years. And now I work for undisclosed federal government as a detective.
Right.
And so, and I've been doing that now for 5 years, and really, really enjoy it, But I really enjoyed law enforcement too. I mean, I think you can really, any job that you can complain about anything, and definitely I'm a good complainer, but you have to have some grace and you have to move on. And I really have enjoyed my career in law enforcement. And it's changed the dynamics, because for 24 and a half years, I was on the roads, on the streets, helping people every single day, multiple people, and just being able to, that really makes you feel good, of course we're altruistic behavior, right? You don't need that, but it's really nice to have that,
right.
So that has been a kind of a dichotomy that has changed. Now I'm still helping people, but you don't see it firsthand, and I don't get as much of like, in the store with my kids and some stranger walks up to me and says, "Hey, I just want to let you know that you were right. The skin is the largest organ of your body," And I'm like, "You do know me, because I would tell them, I can tell you're on drugs because it's the largest skin's the largest organ of your body, and it's the first one to break down when you're doing your drugs, so you don't look real good right now, and try to help them and let them see that, I don't get that as much now, because I'm dealing with a lot of interviews and a lot of detective work, whereas before I was, actually hands in, hands on. So, Yeah.
Contrast. You have this great bride. You've got beautiful kids that are now adults themselves, or young adults. Contrast their life from the life you knew as a kid.
Yeah, it's completely different.
Yeah, and we would all say, "Oh, well, yours have it much, much better." But do you ever have any concerns as a parent that, in a sense, they haven't had some of the adversity you had to navigate?
Theirs was different. It was just different. I think that my children, me being in law enforcement, my children are a little more sheltered than the normal kid is, and they'd probably attest to that as well. But at the same time, they still had challenges, medical challenges, accidents, things that happened in their lives that made them to become stronger, and overcome those things, those adversities. And but no, they didn't have to worry about whether or not they had food every single day, or what kind of food it was. I mean, my sister and I were fine with some Cheerios and some milk. Right. My mom had it easy, and my mom never cooked anything. She would burn it. So, and now I cook all the time, so I enjoy it. And my wife's a fantastic cook. She just doesn't enjoy it. But she's a great cook. But I enjoy doing that, and so. My kids, they get fed,
What a concept.
What a concept, making sure that they're fed, and we've lived in the same home their entire life. That was something that I wanted. I wanted that security, that, being planted somewhere. And then I was their support. I was their cheerleader. My wife and I, we went to every single swim meet, track, cross country, basketball, soccer, volleyball. I mean,
anything, right.
Anything and everything we went to, and even into college, so, just try to support them as much as we can and support them in their college. But I think the difference, though, is that I'm kind of like your dad, but I wouldn't call your dad this, but I call myself this. I call myself a logical jerk, and I don't mean it in a derogatory way. I mean it in a sincere way. I'm a logical person. I look at things logically. And that can be bad because when you grew up with a mother and a sister, you didn't completely understand them all the time. And now I've got a very sensitive wife and two daughters who I can't relate to completely, right? It wasn't until a friend of mine described himself and I as logical jerks. And I just went, I'm a logical jerk. What? Oh, yeah. I guess I am a logical jerk. Because there was that Marine in me, that cop in me that's always looking at things and being safe and, making sure that they're safe. And
analyzing it.
Yeah. What are the factors here? What's the risk here?
Right.
Calculating the risks and stuff. And so I had to be able to learn that I'm a logical jerk in order to recognize if I don't understand something or if I don't recognize something, it's probably emotional or something. Maybe my wife just needs me to give her a back rub. Maybe she just needs me to listen to her. She needs me to talk with her. But she doesn't understand it herself either. It's subconsciously that she's like, hey, she calls me up to the bedroom and says, hey, will you come up here for something? And by the time I get up there, she asks me some question that I think is stupid. I'm like, why did you ask me that, But the logical jerk in me would do that. But I have to pause and go, okay, I don't understand this. This doesn't make sense. Therefore, hey, honey, do you need to talk to me, or do you want a back rub, or maybe it's just some attention, So living with women all the time has been able to balance me out. And I'm not saying that they're bad. I'm saying that it helped me to be better. So
you and I'm thinking I'm getting this right, but we hadn't seen each other talk in quite a long time. When you switched jobs, you're on, and it was a very fast-paced time in my life, and we were just
move
going.
On.
Yeah. It was just there was
Plus you got family.
Probably 2 minutes to think about it and move on.
You got your daughter, your wife.
Many years went by. Many years went by, and let's say I'm going to just take a stab at saying, I don't know, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, something like that. I got a messenger, I believe, that you and your wife went to a Dave Ramsey financial class of some kind. Yeah. And you wrote me a message that came out of that. Yeah. What did Dave Ramsey say that made you want to reach out?
Well, Dave Ramsey was part of it. There was also a counselor that we were dealing with at the time. But Dave Ramsey I have kind of taken on his catchphrase. Somebody asks me how I'm doing, I always say better than I deserve. And I say it so often that everybody that I work with tries to figure out other ways of saying hi to me without saying, how you doing? Because they know I'm going to say better than I deserve because it's always true.
Right.
Now, I mean, I deserve to go to hell. I've done bad things, but not only have people forgiven me, but God, I'm sure, has forgiven me, for the things that I've done. But that sent a message to me that, and also this counselor saying that forgiveness is extremely important. Now, when I left Pinneo and Michelle, I left without paying my last month's rent. And so I had been holding on to that guilt for all of those years. And so that was what I was reaching out to you for, I wanted to find out how much I owed you, and I wanted to apologize for not paying you that month's rent. Now, we're talking 1987 or something like that, and it was more than 4 years ago. It was probably at least a decade ago.
Yeah, but still a long time.
And your answer was the answer that so many people wouldn't say, and that is, you were forgiven a long time ago. It's an answer that your father would have said. Yeah. Really. And that was just it just relieved a weight from me that I felt that because there are so many people that won't do something, won't have contact with somebody, won't go back to church, won't go back to whatever they're doing out of shame. And that's how I felt. I have felt shameful that I hadn't paid my last month's rent, which I don't know how much it was. It was probably not very much at all. But I hadn't paid that for 30 years ago. Yeah. And so that's, and also that created not a friction, but that created me from not contacting your parents as much either. Because I felt guilty that I hadn't paid that.
Yeah. It's really interesting that I think that I grew from that as much as you're inquiring about this. Of course, I process and think, as I think we all should, but I really did think, okay, well, where have I not followed through? Where have I not done what I know I should have done?
Right.
And that you tend to think, well, I could just write on from that, let go of that. But if you do have a conscience, if you do look inside carefully, then things don't go away. They have to be deliberate about moving on from them.
Yes. Yep.
And it really, I think, posed a challenge to me to just ask myself, what's my version of that? Where have I sort of just tried to, and it's like, wow, I kind of don't like what this is stirring up because, I'm a very much just like, okay, move on.
Yeah.
Just don't look in the rearview mirror. Let's go. But I think that there's a lot of value, and I've learned by having several people sitting right here that truly advocate going back.
Yes.
Starting there and really thinking through, because in order to build anything new today, it sort of works off the premise that we're current in life. Wow, I'm not so sure I was so current in a lot of things.
Right.
And so it posed a great challenge to me, Lee, and it meant a lot. It meant a lot that you hadn't, I had truly forgotten it, but I knew you hadn't, and I knew it was sincere, and I thought that was really something. To me, it was one of those deep ocean thoughts that once planted, you realize that you're going to have to grab your journal and go really process this and think about it.
Yeah.
And so I think your counselor, Dave Ramsey, or whoever started that ball rolling, because it posed a challenge going outward.
Yeah.
And it meant a lot. And that reacquainting, I think is really ultimately became very, very important to our family because in some ways, here's my theory. My mom and dad, and I would say especially my dad, made it clear that his job was to raise Jeff and I. It was a job. And that he's not here to be your friend. He's here to make sure that the job is done and that you are independent and able to manage your life and yourself. And there it is. And that was his job. And when Jeff graduated, poof, he's gone. Nobody saw him again. And the same thing. The night I graduated, poof, gone. And we've never asked for anything from our parents. But I think in a sense, it left my dad especially without a job. And so he shifted focus. Well, who else might need, I can just almost picture his face. I can. Who else might need me? Who else needs being scared? No, but who else, where's my next cause?
Yeah.
And he threw himself into you and a couple others. And so it meant an awful lot that when ultimately mom passed and dad passed, it just meant a lot that you were there at their memorials. And you wonder if that would have happened, if you'd have even known of it, had you not been prompted to reconnect with this silly little 1 month's rent from God only knows when.
Yeah.
Right? And so to me, it was like the little things may look little, but they block blessings.
Yes. Yeah.
They block what could be had you attended to the little things.
Yeah.
And when you do tend to the little things, all the blessings and connection and possibilities remain open.
And they have.
Yeah. And it was truly a blessing that, it was really just a couple of us, my brother and I and you, that spoke at my dad's memorial.
And I was honored.
And it was really something that, kind of the early investment in us, and then here you came, and the later investment in you. And it's the way it should be, that people's lives are recognized for what they were. But I contend that if it wasn't for that urging to make things right over a couple bucks of rent, maybe no one would have ever even known that happened, or known too late. They were already gone, you know.
Right.
So I think that's a huge lesson to me. I've processed that and thought, wow, where am I blocking what could be because I'm not attending to something that I could attend to, or I'm too prideful, or too full of shame to go back and reopen the can of worms or something, you know.
And the saying is that unforgiveness only corrodes the vessel that holds it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I was actually on the opposite side of that. I was the one that was holding on to that.
Yeah.
You know, and normally unforgiveness is the person who was wronged. You were the one who was wronged. You'd forgotten all about it. Just like men normally do. We just move on, right?
Move on. Right.
But it really made me open up and really analyze it too about forgiveness. And forgiveness is huge. You know, it's a clean slate, but we have to do it every single day, all day long, because living in the Seattle area, you're going to get somebody that flips you off for doing nothing. You know, they're going to think you did something and they're going to flip you off, and you just have to wave at them and say, you know, sorry, you know, or whatever, you know, but you forgive them, you know, and move on. Because if you don't, you're not holding on to that. Then you get home and your wife says something or your kid says something, and you're still holding on to that, and then it comes out.
Yeah.
And so that's really something that we have to work on daily and, you know, all day long. But then there's the next step. If I did something wrong to you and then I ask for forgiveness sincerely, and you say, you know, that you forgive me, then there's the matter of building trust. And I tell people all the time that building trust isn't just apologizing. Building trust isn't doing the status quo. Building trust is going over, above, and beyond what is expected, because then now you can trust me, you know?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
I told kids when I was when I was on the street and I was going to domestics and stuff like that, if you want to build trust with mom and dad, then go to that old lady's house down the road whose husband died and ask dad if you can borrow the lawnmower and mow the lawn over there, and do it for free. And that, I bet you your mom's going to cry when you do that, but you're going over, above, and beyond to build the trust with your parents again since you messed up. And that's what a lot of people don't get. They think that all they have to do is stop whatever they're doing. And that's not going to solve the problem.
It's not enough. No.
It's not enough.
No. I think that is, well, and, you know, I think too, think about it this way. It's like this hindrance, this something that you're holding back. Okay, get forgiveness, go over and above, move forward from it. It can be a great teacher. I think of you in your law enforcement world. I have lots of friends and students who are law enforcement, they're firemen, they're paramedics, nurses, doctors. What they see day in and day out.
Yeah.
What they are dealing with day in and day out. In a sense, there has to be a cleanse mentally before you go home. They all say some version of this, like they have their way of, be it a 30-minute drive and a certain mantra, something to where you, because the family that's waiting for you or the next person you're meeting or the whatever you're going to take all this trauma that you've just dealt with all day long in people's lives into the next thing is going to mess up the next thing. And it's like that with forgiveness.
Yes.
It's like that with wronging someone. To get on the other side of it means clearing it so that you're open for the next thing, so that life can move on in a positive way. Yeah.
And you had said earlier that it opens you up for blessings.
Yeah.
Well, after I talked to you and you forgave me, I was sitting on the side of the road with my chaplain, and we were, you know, just chatting. He's the chaplain for the police department. We were chatting, and he said, and I got a phone call, and it was my uncle, the sheriff over in Kootenai County, and I answered the phone and talked to him, and he goes, "You've always wanted to know your brothers." And he goes, "I just got a phone call from one of them." So my two brothers that were born before me, they were both adopted out to the same family. And I'd always wanted to know them and never knew them. Well, he says, "Do you want me to give him your phone number?" I said, "Yes." I mean, I'm talking the blessing that happened after you forgave me after all these years. And I'd always wanted to meet my brothers. And now we have this great relationship. And we lived in the same county for 30 years, or it was 20 some years, 20 years. We lived in the same county and didn't
never
even know
knew
it.
each other was there.
No, didn't even know each other was there. And now it's great. I spent some time with them and they spent some time with us, and it's pretty unique.
Yeah, that's crazy. That really is nuts. Well, I'm inspired, Lee, and I'm appreciative of you making time to be here and be a part of this podcast. The stories and themes that I've experienced doing this now for this last year have had certain themes to it. The cards you were dealt with don't necessarily say that this is how your life's going to be.
Right.
Sometimes the most difficult cards create the most amazing stories and people.
Right.
It seems that sometimes the more difficult the circumstance, the more prepared for a unique calling, a unique way of going about some things. I feel your demeanor in your way. I watched the party that they gave when you retired after all the years from the sheriff's office, and you could just tell how people spoke of you and how that you weren't a stereotypical cop. You were someone that cared deeply about people. And I think, empathy, compassion. Well, how do you get that?
Right.
Well, you get that having neglect. You get that knowing and understanding and having a radar for people that are hurting.
Yes.
Right? That
living the life that they were living.
Living the life that they're living, right? You feel where they're at. And
seeing the addiction growing up, now seeing the addiction on the streets.
Exactly, right. You've experienced the language, you know the signs, and yet I find it so interesting that theme of adversity playing into somebody's greatest deliverable in life is not uncommon. And adversity being this great, great teacher if we allow it to do its thing, if we don't derail it with our own bad choices, if we just hang in there, it can serve us.
If we don't fall into that trap as well as, you've had such a hard life, and
Victimhood,
so, we're going to give you a pass today or whatever. I look at it as that I didn't know what I didn't know.
Yeah.
That, what do they call it? Unconscious. So I didn't know what I didn't know. So that took me longer to learn everything that everybody else was being taught by their parents day in and day out. So it just took longer for me to get to the same place that everybody else gets to. But at the same time, that adversity and overcoming those things is what builds character. And when you build character, you have hope. There are a lot of people that I know that don't know how to do half the things that I can do because out of necessity, I had to be able to work on my car, or I built my own house, and so, and learn those things from you and others. But, that is the thing though, is that I couldn't afford to build that house. Now I've got a big, beautiful house. Well, not big, but good sized house that is very nice, that my family loves. But we couldn't afford to do that without building it ourselves, And I think besides the sheetrock, the siding, and the carpet, I did everything else.
I'm just glad you subbed out the sheetrock.
There's no way I was going to do that. I just gave him a couple 6-packs.
That's right. No, I think that's that necessity. If you have to do for yourself, some do it, and then in the doing of it, I don't know, they become more well-rounded. I have, concerns for affluence, where having to work for something really, really hard.
Yeah.
If that isn't the case, I have concerns because is there appreciation?
Right.
Is there a sense of what that took? I think that this is where being challenged, having a certain level of adversity, is good. I recently saw, I'm not going to get it right, but I know everybody can Google anything. Trust me. I'll give you enough facts you could Google it. That somebody just gave a lecture. He's a billionaire that just gave a lecture to the Stanford Business School master's degree program attendees. And the lecture, the title of the lecture, or the last sentence in the lecture, is that I wish for you, meaning all these young, brilliant minds, I wish for you ample doses of adversity.
Yes. Because
his whole speech was around, without it, you're not going to be successful.
Yeah, you have to learn from your failures.
That's it.
It's, you know, we call them failures, but they're not.
They're lessons.
They're lessons.
Right.
And I've learned more from my lessons than I did from my college education.
Right,
you know?
exactly. Right.
It's extremely important. And my children, my wife and I told them, we want you to have adversity. We want you to have challenges in your life, because that is what's going to build your character. And your character is what shines when everything blows up.
Yeah.
When things go wrong, that's where your character shines. And if your character's not right, you're going to blow up and get mad at somebody or yell at somebody. If your character's right, then you're going to know, okay, I got to be calm. I got to work through this whole thing. It's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well,
but
brother,
I think about your dad, though. You know, what was his saying?
Yeah.
That you have to love.
Learn to love what most people won't tolerate.
What most people won't tolerate. And I look at it a little bit different, as I don't look at sacrifices. I don't think of things as sacrifices. I look at, instead of when I had to sell my cars to build a house, that wasn't a sacrifice. No. That was, my family's a priority.
Yeah.
And so I look at it as more of a priority than, and in your dad's statement there, I think of it as, my family's the priority. I don't love, unclogging the septic system.
Right, exactly,
I mean?
right.
But I love my family,
yeah,
and that is why I'm doing it.
Yeah.
And I'm the gopher at home. I'm constantly doing things, and it's because I'm a servant. That is what God has for me, is to be a servant to my family, servant to my country, servant to the law enforcement, to the community. That's my role. I'm a bond servant, as Christ would say. So, yeah.
Well, what an inspiring day. I'll tell you, between there are three that I was able to sit with here today, and I've heard that theme 3 times, and it's pretty awesome. So I've got a lot to think about. Lee, thank you again. This hangar is not on its way to anything you normally go to. So I just appreciate you being here. God bless you. And for all of you listening, thank you so much. I want the world to know how to get a hold of you, and you're sort of secret squirrels. So give them some way to connect with you.
Well, I guess I'm on Facebook.
Facebook Messenger.
Yeah.
Is that a good way?
Under Lee Watson. It's the one with the cartoon.
Lee Watson with the cartoon face.
Yeah, it's a caricature of
with
me
no
and
hair?
my wife. Yeah, with hardly any hair. I think they gave me a bit of hair. And then I can't remember. I have my Instagram. My daughters, they were the ones who, I think it's Lee Watson 1966 or something.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Something like that. So.
All right. Okay. Yeah. Right. Yeah. The rest of it, you can tell us, but you have to kill us all, right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. We won't talk about that. I've been ordered not to.
Right. Thanks again, brother. I appreciate it. And thank you all for listening. I can't wait to be on the next podcast with you. This is Pinneo, over and out.